Hi guys. So, as some of you may already know, since Lucas was not able to make it to session when the party ended up going to Project Vesmara, I decided to give him a chance to get a sneak peek at the little airship dungeon a bit early and flex my old play-by-post muscles. This video is going to be a transcription of that story. All audio, no video. So when he woke up, or what woke him up, was text. Error. Your request could not be completed. Please restart the application and restart your red berries. There were words that were written in red text that scrolled across his vision. This was strange on its own, made more strange by the fact that as this flashing red text rose him from his slumber, his eyes, for the moment, were still closed. Error. Your request could not be completed. Please reconnect the application and restart your red berries. What was stranger still was that Lucas does not remember falling asleep or otherwise passing out. His head hurt, and the last few hours, moments, days, it was all a blur. His last clear memory was diving into the House Kneath complex underneath the department store and fighting a second glass golem. Now, you're pretty sure you won that fight. Maybe. Then that Fred guy showed up and something about Emily, and well, after that, it's just a blur. His headache was concentrated on the front of his face. He felt like you were bludgeoned at some point. That being said, he did not feel as if any of his pockets were empty. He still had all his stuff, but something towel-like was laying atop him. A cape? A morgue sheet? Hard to tell without opening the eyes. Finally, he heard no nearby movement or nearby breathing. He certainly did hear something. Plenty of things. Distant chatter, the rumble of heavy machinery, but none of it near him. Error. Your request cannot be completed. Please restart the application and restart your red berries. What do? Well, that's going to be annoying, Chano said, pulling up the cape off his eyes to try to get a look at his surroundings and whatever mess he's gotten himself into. He reached out to grab the sheet covering his face. Once his hand made contact with it, you were able to identify the covering. This was a tarp. Slightly oily, probably made of wool and linen. Industrial tarp. Not terribly heavy, nor was it held down with any sort of weight to prevent him from escaping. As he moved to sit up and began rolling the tarp off his face, he felt a pull from the left side of his face. Not terribly painful, and felt like something he could overpower, but it felt, as you still could not quite see, almost like a rope extending from his left cheek towards the ground. He continued to sit up and attempted to inspect what was tethering him to the ground. Error. Your request could not be completed. Please reconnect the application and restart your red berries. The text flashed again. He moved to sit up, with the tarp over his head, and he moved into a sitting position. But this small moment itself was enough to disconnect whatever had latched onto his face. And as it did so, a new message popped up on his artificial eyes. Application disconnected. He reached down and grabbed the thing that was plugged into his face. He still couldn't see with the tarp over his head, but it felt like a very narrow and very flexible metal rope with a strange metal anvil-like shape. He felt blood on the end, as it was some sort of metallic leash. It did not move on its own, however. He got up and felt his face for any new unwanted holes and went to take a look at his surroundings while finding a suitable place to hide should whatever put him here return, and checking to see he still had his things. He put his hand to his cheek and felt a hole. Not a terribly large wound, but it was roughly dagger-sized. Not enough to cause actual hit point damage, but it was filled with fresh blood and felt to be the exact shape of the strange metal object that had been tethered into his face. Lucas finally threw off the tarp that was covering him, revealing that you were stuffed in a closet. You found yourself laying in the corner of a fairly small 10 by 10-foot room. The walls and floors were made up of wood, inlaid with bronze and screws, similar to the building materials you might find on an airship. The ceiling was pure metal, without any windows. Yet, despite this, the room was fully lit. Small, glowing gemstones dotted the walls of this room, each and every one of them emitting soft, white In an almost magical light, an enchanted and expensive-looking clock made of gold and crystal was inlaid directly into the ceiling above him, next to an air vent, displaying the time as a crisp 1:45 p.m. Finally, at ground level, apart from himself, he saw that this room may have had more than one occupant. A handful of tarps lay on the ground, identical to the ones that were covering his body, a handful of them covering human-sized lumps. Items-wise, Lucas felt as he still had all of his stuff in the corner of this strange room, down to every single one of the coins in his coin purse. Clearly, whoever had brought him here was not interested in robbing him. Sorry for the yawning. It's still fairly early for me. Finally, this room had two obvious exits. One of the walls next to him had a human-sized, sliding metal door that opened to his left. In addition, there was a ventilation duct in the ceiling next to the clock, 10 feet in the air. With the floor covered in tarps, hiding in this room was child's play. Lucario took some time to inspect the other bodies in the room, assessing for signs of life and inspecting whether or not these people had red berries. He muttered to himself, probably shouldn't have gotten these fucking things, huh? He then cracked the sliding door open a tad and peered out into wherever the door led. There were a few dozen tarps in this room, so while it made a little bit of noise flipping through them, he could move through this room fairly easily. In total, he saw 3 tarps that were roughly humanoid shaped. Moving over to the first tarp-covered shape and throwing it off, he did in fact find a body. She was a dwarf, looked to be about middle-aged. She was dressed in an expensive-looking robe and jewelry, but appeared to be unconscious. She had a pair of red berries installed in her eyes. Oh, oops. She had a pair of red berries installed in her eyes, and a very similar-looking metal tether that was plugged into her cheek in roughly the same place that you had. She did not move on her own, and appeared to be unconscious. Searching under a second tarp, you found a fully dressed skeleton. A skeleton with red berries for eyes, and a metal metal cable sitting carefully beside it. The skeleton was dressed in a fancy-looking suit, like you might expect to see from a house member, though it did not have any obvious identifying marks. Though he was welcome to roll a knowledge fashion check if he wanted to identify the fellow's clothing. Notably, the skeleton had a holstered short sword and a fancy parrying dagger attached to its belt. Under the third tarp, you found piles of garbage and junk. There was a whole host of items here, ranging from chunks of metal and wood, a few dozen sets of worn-down artificer tools, saws and wrenches to hammers and pliers, and he creaked the sliding door open. No witnesses yet. The door opened into a short but narrow hallway, built of much the same material as the room he was in. The corridor was about 3 feet wide and about 10 feet long. There were a handful of other closed doors in the room, connected to various rooms. The door closest to him was a sliding metal door. There was a really big wooden door about halfway down the hallway, and some other simple wooden doors at the far ends of the hallway. None of the doors were labeled, except for, well, 2, I guess now, which were labeled humans and warforged, respectively. Furthermore, as he opened the door, the rumbling sound of machinery he had heard as he woke up became slightly louder. It appeared to be coming from mostly the big wooden door in the middle of the hallway. And finally, he heard the muffled sounds of people talking in the distance. Bad news, this. Luciano pulled the cord connecting out of the other bodies in the room. Now why don't I pay my gracious host a visit? He turned towards the sound of the voices, and he'd stealth his way over. He'd also press his ear up against the floor to see if the machinery had the old familiar feel and sound of an airship. And when he moved to yank the cable out of the dwarf's face, this one was rather sturdy, and it took considerable force to pull out. In addition, it was rather violent. As he yanked the cable out of the woman's face, there was a large spark, an arc of energy as lightning surged out of the metal wire and into the opening on the woman's face. Yet, after a moment, this too broke, and the metal wire he held was dead. The dwarf did not wake up. He crept out of the room and into the narrow hallway and over to the big, sturdy wooden door, clearly locked. Getting closer, he heard words in common, but it was muffled. This door looked to be rather thick. Feeling vibrations below him, he pressed his ear to the ground. It was obvious to his trained ear that he was airborne. and aboard some sort of ship. The engine level below you grumbled with torque and power. Shano sneaked his way towards the voices to see what he could hear eavesdrop. He snuck on over to the big door and gave it a listen. He could definitely hear the sounds on the other side, voices as well as noises. You can definitely hear the chunking of the engine. You are much closer to the airship engines this end of the hallway. You also heard more mundane sounds. The clanking of metal armor, the sound of knife on cutting board, and more magical sounds as well. Oh, it didn't sound like any sort of spellcasting you'd heard before. It sounded bit crunched. And finally, you heard some dialogue between some of the people on the other side of the door. It sounded as if there were half a dozen men total. And he heard various voices arguing over. I sent him an 8-bit song that was playing out of someone's Red Berries. And actually, you know what? I'll just read the dialogue I wrote. Yo, turn that shit down. It's fucking loud. Yeah, I can hear it from over here, man. Oh, sorry, guys. Where's the volume switch on these red berries? I'm telling you, man, all this fancy Bashik armor doesn't hold a candle to, like, shark teeth. If there was a great white shark in this room, we would be fucking dead. You gotta go into your settings menu. Bullshit. If we had a horde of sharks on this ship, we'd be fine. This new armor we're wearing is indestructible. I could put a shark in a headlock easily with these new uniforms. Why do you think Boss started issuing it to all of us? Where the hell's the settings menu in these things? What do you mean, where's the settings menu? I don't know, man. I've seen sharks fight. They tear people worse than the fucking Thranians kicked our ass during the last war. What's so special about this new armor? It feels just like regular metal to me. I don't know what the hell that is. Well, then how the hell did you download that game onto your Redberries? I don't know, man. It just came when I downloaded this new update that Kenneth put out. It was just boom, it was there. You have to go through the settings menu to install things in your Redberry. It ain't no steal. You're wearing enchanted armor, bro. It's called Bashik. It's from the Bashik Mountains. I didn't go through any fucking settings menu. I just blinked when this update dropped and it started installing this Clash of Glory game. You guys should play Clash of Glory. It's really fun. Yo, I tried that, man. It's so tedious. You're just building a base to get better troops, to get resources to build your base with. I know, right? It's super fun. You never run out of things to do. What does that even mean, man? Wait a second. You have your Blink ID set up on your red berries? But what it means is unless someone gets a dinosaur or weapon man out of Bashik, we're fucking invincible. Yeah, well, that's your first mistake, buddy. In case you haven't realized, red berries are just an iPhone analogy. Caden went, or not Caden, Luciano went, what the hell's going on here? Luciano thinks, pivoting from the door. Too many guys in there and heavily armored by the sounds of it. Gotta find a way off this ship. If only I had a featherfall scroll, life would be easy. Luciano turned around and headed down the opposite side of the hallway. And he saw a bunch of doors to his left and a bunch on his right. Uh, the doors on his left were labeled Men, Women, and Warforged. You could go back and check on the rooms full of tarps and stuff he was in. And finally, there was the door directly in the center of the hallway with the sliding metal. What could he do? Well, if nothing, he's not a rule follower. He went into the bathroom. Luciano turned to his right and opened up the bathroom door. The door was not locked. Or rather, Luciano turned to his left in this context, because he'd be going left into the bathroom. Inside, he found himself in an immaculately cleaned 5-star bathroom. This was no mere chamber pot in a tower. This was fancy with a capital F. Fully working toilet, actual plumbing, a solid sink with hot and cold taps, enchanted mirror, and bottles of top-of-the-line men's cologne. White tiled walls, complete bath and shower setup, complete with gemstone-encrusted tassels. There was a medicine cabinet stocked with all sorts of enchanted potions and curatives. This room alone cost the price of an entire small manor back at your hometown. And you knew from your airship experience that installing shit in an airship made things even more expensive. This wasn't just conspicuous. This was almost tacky. Whoever spent this much on a bathroom either had unlimited funds or more money than sense. And, well, Shauna suddenly realized after being unconscious for some amount of time, he desperately needed to pee and enjoyed the wonderful bathroom. Business concluded, he inspected the medicine cabinet. Surely somewhere on the ship there was emergency feather falling scrolls or potions. No feather falling potions to steal, but he did spy a bunch of curative potions. Potions of cure moderate, remove blindness, remove curse, restoration, remove disease, neutralize poison, along with plenty of toothbrushes and toothpaste, enough for several dozen personnel, possibly more. He then checked the women's room and looted a bunch of potions from there, and crept into the Warforged door. And, well, Lucas was not entirely sure if Warforged urinate, but walking into their bathroom looked and felt much more like rolling down his window in the middle of a car wash than a traditional bathroom. You're not even sure you want to know what that pool noodle over there is for. Still, plenty of potions to steal. He yoinked himself a whole bunch of healing potions, potions of rapid repair, whole lot of potions of cure blindness, neutralize poison. All in all, pretty nice haul, though he was still stuck in a hallway and still running out of doors. The conversation seemed to continue from behind the main door, and he now had three paths to take. The door next to the tarp room itself, and the door on the opposite end of the hall. And he decided to take the door on the next to the tarp room. He twisted the handle and opened the door next to the tarp room. This room was also unlocked and looked to be a dorm or a bedroom. It was about the same size as the rest of these rooms. There were a pair of military-style bunk beds in this room. The top bed of each was perfectly made, while the lower bunk was unmade and smelt of human. Two small iron chests lay at the base of the bunk beds, along with a desk, chair, and a magical lamp. A few personal items lay around the room, and there was a letter on the desk. Luciano saw the letter and started walking toward it to see what the hell was going on. But then the loop goblin deep within him reared his ugly head, and he had to go break open the chest first. And he pulled out his thieves' tools, got to work on the chests, and well, after a good few minutes of jiggling the lock, he cracked open the first case. Inside, he found some clothing, some cans of dried beans, bar of soap, sewing needle, a bunch of cloth scraps, a half-constructed doll, a warm-looking army helm with the Crown of Breland emblem, and maybe some other valuables. A bit later, he opened the second one, changed the clothing, dried chocolate and nuts, old dog's collar, as well as a small golden platinum silver flame badge with the words 10 years of service written on it. And he went to go check out the letter. He made his way over to the desk between the bunks. A magical lamp, a wooden stand holding a piece of gemstone that was enchanted with a glowing flame. The desk drawer was closed, but atop the desk was a piece of paper laying on it, with handwritten words visible. Commander Johnson, the illusionary door you suggested is a great idea. I shall have one of the house mages install it before liftoff. I dislike under-table discretionary spending like this, but you're right. Better safe than sorry. As for your other points, no, I don't know where she's going. Perhaps to visit her father in Stormreach? This entire thing was completely unplanned. Personally, I assumed she'd be in a better mood, given all that's happened with Project Phasmara. Given all the... given all the victories we've won lately. Despite this, she has remained melancholy. Between you and me, Johnson, I have no idea why. I had assumed she'd be jumping for joy, given how well the progress reports I've been reading have gone, and yet nothing. No emotion. Her face has been as blank as the glass screens that she spends herself buried in. I swear, Johnson, she seems like a totally different person sometimes compared to the woman I fell in love with. Hopefully, once all this is over, things can go back to normal, but until then, I suppose I will need to endure it. The things we do for love, eh? Furthermore, on that note, I have heard the things the men have been saying about my relationship. Please shut them up. My fiancée is none of their business. It is not their place to gossip if she is marked or not, but if it will shut them up, tell them she is not. We have gone through every test together. She has willingly subjected herself to pain, divination spells, everything, and she is not de Kenneth. It's just Kenneth. I'm marked, she's not. Therefore, our marriage is 100% legal. Not that it's any of your business, mind you, but I hear all the rumors, both myself and what she tells me. And she's under a lot of stress right now, so tell them to cut it out. Or maybe I might cut your security funding and you won't be able to use that fancy enchanted armor anymore. Regardless, I trust your judgment, Johnson. Maybe some of her stress is rubbing off to me, eh? I don't know where she's headed, but do keep me posted. I've downloaded the newest update via Redberry. It does make interhouse communication much faster than writing an old-fashioned letter like this. Redberry is the greatest invention House Kenneth ever came up with. It's a shame we won't get to use it once everything is ready, and we all get to experience Project Fismara, though, eh? Have a good flight. Brian de Lathander Lachance. At which point, Lashana realized that his brother had gotten himself wrapped up in all this shit. Doesn't appear he's on the ship, but for now he needed to find a secret door. He began combing over this room, looking for buttons or levers of magic on the walls. And with his airship knowledge, he was aware that this was not the captain's cabin. The captain's cabin tends to be on the far aft of the ship, or in some cases taking up an entire deck of the ship. This room with its bunk beds and lockers seemed to me barracks for the rank and file. Possibly an officer, but definitely not the commander's room. You knew of no airship commander that could afford a ship this fancy and yet slept in a bunk bed. A moment later, as you were just starting your search through this room, he suddenly felt a surge of power, and the hair all over his body surged with energy. And this is when Lucas rolled and failed his will save before session, followed by a deep, guttural roar that came directly below you. It sounded an awful lot like Duke. He continued to search around the room, looking for any additional sources of information, and did not find a whole lot. The room was fairly Spartan. The blankets on the beds were kind of comfy looking and pretty thicker than military standard. There's a hair comb in one of the beds. The drawer on the desk was unlocked, though at this point, his thoughts kind of drifted out of the room to that sliding metal door next to the tarp room, the one door he had never investigated. Kind of looked pretty sus. In addition, he heard one of the guardsmen call out in response to the big roar and say, "What the hell was that?" Yup, time to go. Luciano stealthily dashed out of the room to hit the final door. He darted out of the bunk bed and towards the final door. As he did, some of the voices responded to that initial yell. "Well, it sure as shit ain't the engines. Where are the prisoners being kept?" "Bottom decks, Commander Johnson." "Well, then clean yourself up and grab your blade. I want you to—" Interrupting the voice came a second roar from below decks. He heard the stomping of feet, the jingling of chains, the sound of metal wires being snapped like twigs. "Bad idea," came the response from the below decks. It did very much sound like Duke. At this point, he had made his way over to the final sliding metal door in this hallway. It did not appear to have a lock on it, and its metal surface reflected his reflection. He moved to open it, and reached out to grasp the metal sliding door, and his hand passed right through it. As a result, Lishano poked his eyes through the door to inspect. Sticking his head right through, Lishano had successfully located the illusionary door. Though what greeted him on the other side of the illusion was by no means any more welcoming. He saw more hallway, and more doors. At least half a dozen more, done up in much the same size and manner as the ones that he'd been exploring so far, including a relatively fancy door at the far end of the hallway, locked with an obvious-looking magical glyph. All the doors were closed. The ship was at least twice as long as what he'd explored so far, possibly even up to 3 times as long. This ship was huge. Yet what was stood directly on the other side of the illusionary door that seemed to dwarf the newfound size of this airship in importance. On the other side of the illusionary door, waking up from a trapdoor in the floor, was Duke. Or perhaps it was more correct to say it was a monster that resembled Duke. Vishana saw a humanoid figure, a little over 6 feet tall, bursting with muscles and energy. Its skin was a thick, leathery blue, crackling with strange silver energy. Its hands were giant, oversized slabs of meat. The destroyed remains of Duke's armor lay tattered at the creature's waist. A large, sizable-looking shark fin burst through the back of its elongated neck, the creature's face resembling an anthropomorphic great white shark than any sort of humanoid grin. In its meaty hands it held Duke's old longsword. The blade seemed rather dinky and inadequate to fit the larger creature's hands. Finally, a metal wire nearly identical to the one that you woke up to plugged into your neck and was dangling out of the side of the creature's neck, though rather than fully remove the cord, it seemed to have been cut or seared off. Silver energy that Luciano might recognize from a different time in a different universe, but that's neither here nor there. And he asked if the wereshark noticed him, and I assume Luciano was enough of a sneaky boy to not immediately reveal himself when he sticks his head through a door. He then nat 20 to check to see if he recognized that glyph, and he did. He was able to recognize the math of glowing blue magical symbols as a active glyph of warding. This is a type of magical lock / magical trap used by wizard types. The caster sets all the conditions for the ward, when it triggers, who it triggers for, a bypass password, and the glyph lasts forever until triggered. And when the glyph detects an intruder, it blasts them with a spell, anything from Scorching Ray to getting banished to Shavarath. Magical traps like Glyph of Warding were fairly tricky to disarm compared to regular mechanical traps, and were impossible to disarm unless you happen to be a class with the trap finding class feature. Luciano then was going to make an effort to dart forward into one of the doors, and assuming these rooms were as empty as the previous ones, to study the wereshark, see where it intended to go, and see if he could sneak around him. He was taking a penalty to stealth for moving quickly and for being observed there, but with a 33, with impeccable timing and a sudden burst of speed, Luciano timed his movement until the shark monster was looking upwards, and he moved silently right below the monster's line of sight as he darted right through the illusionary door and into one of the bunk rooms adjacent to the creature. Thankfully, this door was also unlocked as he darted inside. Its room was much the same as the one he was just in: 2 bunk beds, 2 foot lockers, desk, magical lamp, etc. As he moved, he witnessed the monster slam the trapdoor it came through closed with its foot, and move its head to twist the doorknobs on the illusionary door, only to realize, much as he had, that the door was illusionary. "What the fuck?" yelled in its Duke adjacent voice. "What the fuck is this place? Where the hell am I?" As the monster stepped halfway through the illusionary door, he heard the sound of another door creaking open, and an armored man stepping forward from the larger room. "Hold it right there," came the voice. It was one of the second voices. Drop your claws! Keep your hands where I can see them!" Luciano could not see the guardsman from the other side of the illusionary door, but he could hear the fear in this man's voice, and the excitement and rage in the Duke monster's voice. If he didn't do anything, there was going to be a fight in a few moments. And, well, with no love lost for the guards that had kidnapped and hooked them up to strange wires, Luciano decided to do absolutely nothing. "That's funny," came the response from the shark as he moved forward, drawing Duke's sword and shield, both of which cracked with white lightning. "You're funny, boy. Now answer my question. Where the hell am I? If you give me an answer I like, I might even let you keep your arms attached to your body." The shark stepped through the illusionary door towards the guardsman, out of visual range, but most certainly not out of ear's range. And then it charged. He heard the guardsman scream and countercharge the beast while swinging a weapon. The roar of combat followed. Well, you could not see the battle from this side of the holographic door. You heard the chopping of bites, the grunts and heaves of melee combat, the cuts and stabs of bladed weapons, and the bludgeoning of shields. Both combatants roared. "Kyle!" came a cry from behind the fortified door. You were unable to 100% fully place the voice, given the chaos. "Get into position, men!" cried the voice identified as Commander Johnson. "Standard formation, shields up front, business in back. In front of me, people, and keep your heads down." Luciano himself looked around. Another half dozen doors, mostly dorms. A trapdoor in the floor the monster came out of was an option, and there was the glyph of warding. Once he stayed on this side of the illusion and moved silently, it concealed him in view of the melee. The melee wouldn't last forever. And, well, then that leads into the events of last session. Hope this was able to answer a lot of your questions about what the hell Luciano was doing. But yeah, long story short, his red berries, because they were screwed with, gave him a chance to wake up early and do a bit of recon for the party. TTYL.